Okay, so this is a sikha from Lakoti Sikh's Chelik Beis. First, we're going to talk about the idea of, it speaks in this week's parsha about the kosher animals. And one of the things about the kosher animals is that we have simonim, it's called. We have signs to be able to determine what makes a kosher animal. It has to be sheshas shesa, mafris parsa, and malagera. In other words,
somewhere that malagera it has only teeth underneath. That you heard about it or something?
I don't know. I know it has like a few stomachs. It has a few stomachs. So once it goes into one stomach, that's how it chews its cud, because then afterwards it like goes up, and then it chews its cud and goes on to a different stomach.
Yeah, but I'm saying this is not something that we could see. I heard that there is a sign. How do you know
if it's malagera? Because of the teeth.
Because of the type of the teeth.
Interesting.
On top or underneath or something.
Interesting. So, and another thing, the main thing is you talk about over here is the split hooves, that the splitting of the hooves has to be completely in two. In other words, it can't just be split on the top. It has to go all the way through, because I guess there are certain animals that you could have it will be split on the top, but the bottom will be
probably like alpaca or one that's not kosher, probably that.
So it has to be split through and through. So we're going to explain mainly about the spiritual significance of the splitting of the hooves. He's also going to explain about malagera chewing its cud, and then afterwards we'll see if we'll get into the part of the sikha about Elul. And this is the Rebbe is going to talk about the beginning of the sikha, that when you have something that's in the physical realm, it's a reflection of something in the spiritual realm. So the fact that in the physical realm, a sign of a kosher animal are these things, it's because it's something reflecting in the spiritual source. The Parsha Shavua, Nidoine Zoisa Behema Shotachelu, Behemas Toidas, Vabehema Shaloitachelu, Behemas Tmeis. It talks about what's kosher, what's not kosher. Two signs to be able to determine if something is kosher is that it has to be chewing its cud and it has to have split hooves. Now the Rebbe is going to talk about when the Torah gives signs for something. So there's two ways of looking at these signs. One way, the simonim, the signs, we could say, is that the actual signs, for reasons we don't understand, but the actual chewing of the cud and the actual splitting of the hoofs, it actually makes the animal kosher. Another way of looking at it is, these are kosher animals because this belongs in that category. How do you know if they are kosher animals? So Hashem put a sign to that animal, the split hooves and the chewing of its cud. That's what he's going to explain about now. Aleph, gormim. Simonim sheim atzmam nimuk v'sibel ledavar. The simonim themselves are the cause. That's the reason why it is that way. Ubenidin dedan mishum shabehema malzgeira mafreses parsa lefichach behema Torah. The actual signs of the kosher animal make it kosher, not just let us know. For example, you look at a kosher product. It has on it a kosher symbol. The kosher symbol didn't make it kosher. The reason why it has a kosher symbol is to let us know that it's kosher, because some mashgiach checked out and made sure it was only kosher ingredients. But the fact that you put an OU on a label doesn't make it kosher. As opposed to the signs of a kosher animal, the actual eating, the actual chewing of the cud or splitting of the hooves, that actually is what makes it kosher. It's not just a sign. That's one way of looking at it. There's an alternate way of looking at it. Beis mavdilim. Simonim shaloi hema goymim v'asibis lodavar ela shemevarim satara yipucha shel tara hakayomim bedavar machmas atzmai hametzias misbareres b'mtzos hasimonim. This means that the OU symbol that Hashem gave us is split hooves and chewing of its cud. So just like the OU symbol doesn't make the food kosher, the food is kosher, but the OU puts a sign so you should know that it's kosher. The same thing, cows are kosher. for reasons we don't know why. Hashem put on a cow 2 signs to indicate that it's kosher, and only when you have those 2 signs together is it kosher, like the OU. Only if you have the O and the U together. If you have a U alone and an O alone, it's not going to be kosher. So the same thing, the sign of a kosher animal is 2 components, split hooves and chewing its cud. The Rebbe is going to talk about regardless of which approach we take, and in other places the Rebbe speaks about it, and other commentaries talk about it, regardless of which approach we take, whether it's actually making it kosher or it's just a sign, but nothing is by chance, and everything reflects a deeper spiritual meaning. So even if it's only a sign and it doesn't actually make it kosher, it also has a deep spiritual significance. Pnimis HaTorah, Torah's Chassidus, Koireches Moshel Benimshel. Lamrois Moshel Adavar Zor Ve'enu Meshamish Al Moshel Bavad, Karuchu Benimshel Lefisha Ein Ba'olam Davar Mikre Greda. Whenever something is used as a metaphor for something else, it's connected with that spiritual thing that it's a metaphor for. Let me just give you an example. In Torah, we have, let's say, a lot of times metaphomorphisms for Hashem. We speak about the eyes of Hashem, the hand of Hashem, an outstretched arm. It's using metaphor. Hashem does not have a physical body. So the eye is just an analogy. Just like we see with our eyes, so Hashem's all-seeing nature is also called an eye. The same thing, just like our strength is in our arm, by saying the arm of Hashem, that Hashem took the Yidden out of Mitzrayim with an outstretched arm, that shows on Hashem's strength. So it's a mashal, it's a metaphor. But that in a deeper sense, the metaphor is connected with the thing that it's describing. Va'uv de shepratze mishamish moshel animshel zeh, umishum shamoshel nevea min animshel. Teuchen animshel kish mishtalshel la'olam nachos yoisen nefach lemoshel. What the Rebbe is saying over here is as follows. How do we have the power of sight in our eyes? It all came because Hashem has the power of sight. How do we have the power of strength in our arm? Because Hashem has the power of strength. Therefore, it's not just that our arm is a metaphor, a mashal for Hashem's strength, and our physical eye is a mashal, a metaphor for Hashem's seeing, but when Hashem brings down, and in the terminology of Chassidus is metzamtzim, constricts, and draws down his power of sight into our experience, then it turns into a physical eye down here. That is why we could use our eye as a mashal for Hashem, because it came from that. So the same thing the Rebbe is going to apply this concerning the signs. The reason why these became even just a kosher sign is because on some level they are related to it spiritually. Last paragraph in the first column. Even if you tell me that the signs are not the cause, they're only signs, they're still connected with the thing. Top of the second column. It's not by chance. Meshamish prat zeh kissimel davar, ela shadavar atzmai kishu mishtal shel dargen nechusi yoser hoifechul simon. There is a spiritual significance of these things, but in our world, it comes down to a physical split hoof, a physical chewing of its cud. Move on eifo sheshnei simonim miles geiru mafreses parsal kol sug shel simonim shem sheyachim alav. Therefore, we must say that whatever the spiritual significance of chewing its cud and splitting its hoof, it has to do with what eating is about. What does it mean to eat as a Jew? It's connected with split hooves. What does it mean to eat as a Jew? It's connected with chewing its cud. Inyan achila base. So first he's going to explain now what is the concept of eating by a Jew.
The two types of sugim.
Yes.
This is the Rebbe's
No,
Kiddush, or
no.
it comes from
That's what he says in the bottom. He's Sasvanech, the Rogat Shavar. So he says, what is the concept of eating? He says, Husha Adam Noitel Chai Tzemeach Oidoimim Uba'achloi Oisoi Hoifechu Dama Baskim Sari. Food is about taking different components of the world around them. That's usually divided into the categories of the inanimate, inorganic, vegetation, or living creatures, and transforming them to himself. They are now becoming part of the human being. So essentially there's 4 levels in creation in this world, in the physical world, and all of the lower 3 levels become now uplifted into the highest level, into the human being, because they become part of my blood, part of my flesh. It becomes part of the human being. It's brought down, it's not a chiddush of the Rebbe, I think it's the Sefer Ikrim that says that really, some people like to say, how, by what right do we have to eat animals and so on. It's actually reaching its perfection. The animal is now becoming human. The vegetation, the wheat is becoming human. The water, the minerals are now becoming elevated to a higher form of existence, a higher plane of existence. When a human being eats it, it becomes part of the human.
how
What's daimim? Water, salt, any other minerals that are in the earth that now become absorbed and feed, let's say, the wheat. That from that I made the bread.
how are the not kosher animals get elevated?
So their elevation, it's brought down Chassidus in a way of shvirason zui takanoson.
Meaning?
They're being pushed away. That is their elevation. Their purpose in this
How do
world.
I elevate, I don't know, Gamal?
I'll explain it to you. There's a story about Eliyahu Bahara Carmel that he was making a challenge and a contest with the Nevi'im of the Baal, with the false prophets of the Avodah Zarah called the Baal. And to make sure that everything is even, so they allowed them to have identical animals to bring. Let's see, if you bring a carbon to your God, a sacrifice, I'll bring a carbon to the God, to Hashem, and we'll see who miraculously fire will come down from heaven for. Now, the Medrash, Chazal tell over a story that the animal, I think they chose it by lottery, so that everything should be considered fair and square, everything even. So the animal that fell the lottery to be brought for a carbon by Elio went with him. But the animal, then it fell the girdle to go with the Nevi Habal, didn't want to go. Because it felt like it's missing out. Here you have the opportunity to be brought for Hashem, and instead I'm going to be... So Elio told the animal, don't worry. Through you, it's also going to be Niskad Hashem Shemayim. Hashem's name is going to become sanctified, because when they shecht you and they see there's no fire coming down from heaven, that itself will be a sanctification as well. So there's a certain type of aliyah of the sparks, a certain type of elevation that takes place through not eating. But that's not what we're concerned about now. Here, the main focus is about what takes place when we eat. That when we eat, we're taking and elevating all the different parts of the world to a higher level. And the truth is, even more so, the whole order of creation works that way, that every level in the creations of Doimim Tzemeach Chai Medaber, the inanimate, the vegetation, the living creatures, and the human being, each one can incorporate the lower level to become part of the higher level. It doesn't work the opposite. So vegetation receives from the doimim, from the inanimate, from the inorganic, from the minerals in the earth, from the water. The animals will receive from the vegetation. They will eat, especially kosher animals, they eat grass, plus they eat the doimim, the inanimate. And human beings will eat the animals. So everything, not only the fact that I have on my table, I'll have salt, and I'll have bread, and I'll have meat. So then I'm already directly incorporating the doimim tzemeach chai, but also in the order is it's constantly working that way. Everything is working its way up up the ladder. But we'll soon point out that this, I think, what the Sefer Ikrim says, and then the purpose of the human being is to join with Hashem. By serving Hashem and thereby joining with Hashem, it's not just he himself is being elevated, so now everything in the whole system is being pulled up as well. The doimim that he ate, the tzemeach, the chai, all of it that became part of him is now becoming elevated to Hashem. Which is very interesting because this helps understand the Maimer Chazal that says, Ama oretz asur lecho basar. Someone that's not with the program, is not focused on connecting with Hashem, he should not eat meat. In other words, there is a room for vegetarianism. If you are not productively joining with Hashem, so truly, why should you eat meat? Someone that's joining with Hashem, someone that's serving Hashem, someone that's using the energy of the meat to actually do mitzvahs and to learn Torah and to daven. So then the animal is thankful to him, and the vegetation is thankful to him, and the inanimate is thankful to him. But someone that is, remains in this world, so what benefit? What am I better off becoming part of you than being independent? But that's like a little bit off the track. Now, the Rebbe adds another thing. There is a concept that's spoken about a lot in Chassidus and in other places in Torah, that every time when we have multiple categories, nothing stands alone. And in every category, there is an inclusion of others in it. So in the Adam, in the Medaber, in the human being, there is the doimim part of the person, the inanimate, there's the vegetation in the person, and there's the animal part of the person. And the person needs to take those part of his being that are like inanimate or only vegetation or only like an animal and bring it up to the level of the Medaber. Let's see this is the second paragraph in base. Adam atzmei klulim pratim shebehem udoime ledoimim tzemeach v'chai. Dugmas hagnemer begemara b'shloisha nidma kibehema. In three things, for example, a person is likened to an animal and is eating, sleeping, cohabitation. V'klulim by pratim b'hem shoynahum natzemeach b'hem u'adam mina medaber. Then there are things that make a person uniquely human. So in some things, you can't tell a difference between a person and an animal. Or even sometimes between a person and an inanimate thing. But in some things, he is higher than them. So kashem shalagabe doim tzemeach chai medaber boifim kloli harei atachlis eina doim tzemeach chai kima medaber v'gam hamayla shebedoim tzemeach chai hu davke kashem nechlolim medaber. Just like we are saying that the goal and the purpose of the inanimate, the vegetation, and the living things are not in them themselves, but only in the human being. And also that becomes expressed only when they become part of the human being. where is my advantage and where is my specialness expressed? That I can eat a good meal. What am I different than an animal in that? What am I even, the fact that I'm growing, what am I different than vegetation? I need to be distinctly human and to show my unique human qualities that an animal doesn't have, that vegetation doesn't have. Tachlis, shar protov adoim tzomeach chai sheboy sheyugam hem behesam lamdaber sheboy v'yichlu boy. Even more so, it's not just that my human side is the most important part. But even when I do things that externally are like an animal, I eat, I sleep, or whatever, those things should be infused with humanity. I shouldn't be eating like an animal. I shouldn't be sleeping like an animal. I sleep and eat and do all other quote-unquote animal-like things, but as a human being, because all of this is part of the human part of me. That's when I'm eating the food, the main purpose of the eating of the food, whether it's a living animal, whether it's vegetation, whether it's an inanimate thing, inorganic things, the purpose is they should become humanized. How do they become humanized? How do they leave their state of being a chai or tzameach or a doimim? When I use them like a human being would use them, I'm not using them like an animal. So when a person eats the steak, he eats his vegetables, he drinks his drinks, and as a result of that, now he can act like a yid, for example. Now he could perform and do something positive. So then he truly elevated the food that's made from the doimim sameach chai and made it human. But if the energy that you just now got from eating the food is to eat more food, so you never really took that chai that's in you, that animal that's in you, and elevated it to the human part. You let the animal that you absorb within you remain animal. Gimel. The word Adam, the name Adam, it's very interesting. The Torah explains why Chava is called Chava. Ki hi heisa eim kol chaya. The Torah explains why she's called Isha. But it's interesting, the Torah and the Chumash does not say why a person is called Adam, in a simple sense, because it's obvious. Because he's min Adama, he came from the earth, that's why he's called Adam. Chassidus always emphasizes but something higher. Adam is related to what it says, Edmel Elyon. I am likened to above. The human being down here, a yid down here, is similar to Hashem. Kiviyachol la'adam ha'elyon sh'alakisei shu adam ha'miti. Yechezkel ha'navi saw an image of a man above sitting on a throne. That's the true Adam. Very interesting point. You remember we said before how the eye is a mashal, is a metaphor for Hashem seeing. That's why we speak about Hashem having Einei Hashem, or Yad Hashem, or Zroya Hashem. The truth is that who has a stronger power of sight? Hashem or us? Hashem. He has no limitations. He has no distant issues. He has no problems with dark or light. He can see in the past, he can see in the present and the future. His power of sight is completely beyond anything we have. Therefore, it's not we have sight and we use our sight as a metaphor for Hashem, but the true power of sight was by Hashem. The same thing, the true Adam is the way it says in the Navi that Yechezkel saw an Adam ala Kisa. He saw the image of a man on the throne. And then Hashem made something similar to him down here that can have certain similarities to him. And that's why the person down here is called Adam from the word Edma, that I'm similar to. Amitusa shel Mailus HaMedaber is really by Hashem. What is a person's value? Because he's similar to above. That's what makes him a Adam. That's what makes him on the top tier of these 4 levels of existence. Yisroy Shala Adam. This is what we said. I mentioned this before, that I believe the Ikrim is the original person that said it. When I fulfill the purpose that the supernal man, the man above, sent me, so then I have expressed Hashem's Adam in my Adam. Lekut of the Alter Rebbe, Shaidekim, Shlichus Adam Elyon, Nasim Kemoisai, Zu Haikololus Ba'adam Elyon. As we said before, my job is, I am supposed to consume and bring up into me all the other levels of existence below me, and then I have to become part of Hashem, and therefore elevate everything that's with me. So now, when does that take place? That takes place when a person fulfills the mission that he was done. There's an expression in Chazal, in the Gemara, Shliach shel Adam k'moisei. That it's a legal construct, that a person has legally the power of doing things on behalf of someone else that appointed him to do it in his place. Legally, technically, I don't have to be by my own wedding. I could send a messenger with a ring and tell this woman to get married to me with this ring. That's something else. But the actual marriage ceremony is something that's a legal construct, and for any legal construct, it could help a shlichus. There's other things that are not a legal aspect that shlichus doesn't help. For example, I can't make another Jew a shlich to put on film for me, or to daven for me, or to keep Shabbos for me. But things that have a legal construct, I can make someone a shliach. It's the expression that the Chazal uses, shliach shel adam k'moisei, that a representative, a messenger of someone is just like the person himself. In this context, the Rebbe is applying this to Hashem. We said Hashem is called Adam Elyon, the man above. When we are a shliach of the Adam Elyon, meaning we are fulfilling the mission that Hashem placed upon us in Torah mitzvahs, so we are kamoisai, just like Him. We become part of Him, and therefore we are able to elevate everything that became part of us. Yesh b'zaseider v'adrag, your last paragraph in the first column. Tchila misbata hadavar bedargen nechusa, la'acher mekein bedargen nail soiser. Ad she'odam mevi atzmil deiskalos muchletes ba'odam ha'elyon. The Rebbe says over here, there are different stages in this. In also the Rebbe speaks in other places that there's different stages in shlichus. There's different ways how I fulfill the mission of Hashem. There is where I still feel completely independent until such a way that I do not feel myself as something separate. It's like I can't do other than Hashem's will. There's different stages of this. He says, first comes the avodah that you follow Hashem. Acharei. When it says acharei, it means like behind. When you're following someone, you're going behind them. That doesn't show a very powerful relationship. You're following them. You're doing what they want you to do. They're leading, you're following, but it's still behind. It's not a true connected relationship. B'bchinas acharayim b'lvad, it's only you relating to the back. Ad shemagia adam l'tachlis ha'yisalus u'boisid bakum. There's a whole series of things that the pasuk says after Achrei Hashem Elokechem Talechu, and it concludes, and you will cleave to Him. In such a situation where it says he's not independent, he is completely joined, that he's entirely one with Hashem. And this was expressed by Moshe Rabbeinu. before we read this inside, we know Chumash Dvarim, Moshe Rabbeinu speaks in first person. In other words, he talks the story like he lived it. In the first 4 Sfarim of the Chumash, the first 4 books, Bereshit, Shmos, Vayikra, Bamidbar, it's Moshe Rabbeinu recording the story like a narrator is recording. It says, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, in the expression of the Ramban, Kishlishi Hamadaber. There's it's a style of writing. There's a narrator. You'll read a book, and there's like someone outside of the story telling the story. The same thing is in the first 4 Chumashim. Chumash Dvarim is different. Moshe Piatzma Yamra, Moshe is speaking what he did and what he experienced and what he said to the Yid. Because that he's speaking in first person, the language is often very different. But there's a certain part in Chumash Dvarim that doesn't seem to fit this idea. In the second parsha of Krishma, last week's parsha, V'haya im shamaya tishmu, Moshe Rabbeinu says that if you will listen to the words of Hashem, so then it says, V'nosati esav b'sadcha. I will give grass in your field, lebehemtecha. Moshe Rabbeinu is not the one that gives the grass. How did Moshe Rabbeinu say, V'nosati esav b'sadcha lebehemtecha? I will give the grass. He's talking in first person. It's not I, Moshe. It's Hashem that's giving it. He should have said, if you will listen to Hashem, Hashem will give the grass in the field for your animals. So the Rebbe says on the top of 81, second column, Dugmas Dagas Moshe Rabbeinu Shamar v'nosati esav lefi shahaya batal legamri membli shahaya mitzias la'atzmai v'nachnu ma. It says that Moshe and Aaron said about themselves, what are we? Shechina medaberes mepuma delay. The Shechina would speak straight out of the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu. V'hayu eila divrei hashchina b'emtzois chamisha moitzois hapeshaloi v'zu dargas u'boisid bakun. When Moshe Rabbeinu said the words in V'hayim Shemaya and Parshas Ekev, that it said v'nosati esav b'sadcha, it was Hashem speaking through the 5 enunciators of the mouth. The mouth is divided into 5 sections. Our sages teach that's responsible for different letters: the teeth, the tongue, the palate, the lips. These are the throat. These are responsible for different things. Hashem spoke through the 5 enunciators through the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu, and then Hashem said, "V'nosati esav b'sadcha." How come? Because Moshe Rabbeinu was in such a great state of bittul to Hashem that he could be a complete channel and conduit for Hashem speaking through him. So this is the point that he's saying. There's many different ways and many different levels of the Adam down here being a reflection of and connected with the Adam above. The most powerful way is the way it was by Moshe Rabbeinu. But any Yid, when he does a shlichus of Hashem, any Yid that does a mitzvah is also considered shluchai shel Adam k'maisai. He's called Adam from the word edma la'elyon. He's similar and connected to above. Like we said before, that it's not just the purpose that I, the Adam, should connect with Hashem, but when I consume the animals, and I consume the vegetation, and I consume the inanimate things, and I connect with Hashem, so then I'm, by extension, connecting the animal that became part of me. I'm connecting the vegetation that became part of me. I'm connecting the daimim, the inanimate thing that became part of me. Now, this was all to explain what is eating. We've been doing it for how many years of our life? The Rebbe spent now X amount of words to explain to us what is the true function and the true meaning of eating and consuming food. Now, Based on this, we'll be able to reconnect it back why the food that we eat, the hooves have to be split. And also, why you need it needs to have its the cud, it has to chew its cud. You want to actually take the animal. The pasuk says that the nature of an animal is the opposite of a human being. The spirit of a human being is to rise upwards. The spirit of an animal is to draw down. How can the two meet? We're going in two opposite directions. The nature of man is to connect with Hashem. The nature of an animal is to connect with the physical, with the material. How can I incorporate that into my service of Hashem? First, the animal has to become part of the human down here, and then to become part of the Adam above. It's a long road to travel. And there's an expression in the Gemara, all paths are dangerous. In other words, there's no assurances that I'm going to be successful. So I have to have certain protections put into place to make sure that I am the one raising the animal up instead of the other way around, that the animal doesn't draw me down. These two signs of the splitting of the hooves and the chewing its cud, this is an indicator for us and shows us how we can approach the animal kingdom and raise it up. If when a person is focused on Hashem, then he is safe. Then you could be assured that he'll be able to elevate even an animal. But if he's focused on his own gratification, on his own desires, so then then these are things you have to stay away from. We'll explain how splitting the hooves assures us of that. Top of the next page. Hey. B'toyra oir medubar Rabbi Chanina ben Tradian she'asa shnei dvarim. Meiser echad ha'shayach l'kava chesed u'meiser sheni ha'shayach l'kava gvura ve'shneihem kiyam ba'ofen shava metoichach yuven she'asa zois loy machmas tivoi kiyam k'toitzah ma'avidasei. There was a story with Rabbi Chanina ben Tradian. He wanted to know if he had a certain type of merit, and he was asked by a colleague of his, what did he do? And he told his colleague that he did, that they did. Finally, he told a story about giving away a whole bunch of money to tzedakah. Because there was a doubt, maybe it wasn't, he was what's called a gabbai tzedakah, someone that was in charge of tzedakah funds, and he was worried about the funds got mixed up with his own money. Anyway, so when this other person heard this, that he gave away all of his money because he was worried that maybe there was mixed in some tzedakah funds in his own private money, so then he said, don't worry, you're okay. Why? So the Alter Rebbe goes into a whole explanation that Rabbi Chanina ben Tradian was known for his self-sacrifice and known for other very tough aspects of his tough stance for Yiddishkeit. Toughness in Yiddishkeit can be, maybe you're just a tough guy, and you use Yiddishkeit for that. The same thing, being nice in Yiddishkeit. A big Baal tzedakah, someone gives a lot of money away for tzedakah. It could be he's not doing it because of his connection with Hashem, it's just, he's a nice guy. But if a person is equal in both sides, he's tough where you got to be tough. He has, let's say, self-sacrifice for Torah mitzvahs. He's willing to endure all types of discomfort for fulfilling Hashem's will. And at the same time, he is there for another person. He's helpful to another person. These are two opposite types of natures. This means that his service to Hashem is not because of his own nature, but it's totally devoted to Hashem. When a person has two equal lines in the service of Hashem, then you know he's on the right track. Otherwise, it might not be out of Hashem's service. It might be because that's his natural tendency. If it was a natural thing to him, if it was because of his nature, so perhaps he would do both things. But one he would do with passion and excitement, because that's his nature. And the other one he would just do, b'kabbalah soil, he's got to do it. It says so to do it, so I'm doing it. And the Rebbe is going to bring an example from this from Avram. כפי שנאמר בספרי, שמידוס האהבה והיראה הם מידוס הפכיות, ואינם מסוגלות להופיע יחד, ורק בעבודת הוויה אפשר שתי המידות יחד. The truth is, love and fear don't work together. Let's say I could love someone, but I'm not going to love someone and also fear someone. Either I fear someone or I love someone. I can fear a king and I can love my child, but it doesn't seemingly work together.
Right. If you love Hashem, so you
the exception.
The opposite what Hashem wants.
The exception, he says, ba'avodas Hashem. Ba'avodas Hashem, there's both love and awe together. That's the exception. And that's a similar idea to what we just now said. He could have a streak of kindness and he could have a streak of toughness, and both of them are equal. So now he's going to bring a very interesting thing about Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, every day before davening, we say in the Akedah a very interesting thing, which is a very strange sentence really. It says, Avraham Avinu, it says, had 10 tests. Hashem put him through 10 tests. We have this in Pirkei Avos. It was last Shabbos, I think. Perek Chamishi, right? So 10 tests Avraham Avinu went through. The final test, the last test, was the Nisayon HaKedah, the test of binding Isaac. After that test, it says, Ata yadaiti ki yireh Elokim ata. Now I know that you fear Hashem. He went right through 9 tests. Why is it this 10th test that Hashem said, now I know? Because the 10th test showed the other side of his devotion. Let's see it inside. Zugam mashmois adamar legabi Avram Avinu v'davke beis nesoyin hakedah. Ati yadaiti ki yireh Elokim ata. Hanisyonos hakoydim hayikulam b'kavechad kaveh yamin. The previous challenges that Avram Avinu faced were primarily in how giving he was, how devoted he was, how kind he was, and so on. Perhaps he was just a nice guy. It wasn't about his devotion to Hashem. He was a nice guy. That's why he invited guests. The fact that he wanted to bind Isaac and he was ready to take his only son's life, this is a completely opposite line. Then it became clear that even what was going on before, even the kindness that he did before, was also not because of his nature. Because once you saw that he had an equal approach to both things, so you knew, regardless what Hashem asked of him, it would all be a total devotion to Hashem, not because of his own ego or self-interest and so on. Zeh siman shel mafreses parsa of splitting the hooves. Adam oiski b'kav echad bolvad kiyum b'desachad samcha. One support, it's called. We know that nothing can stand just on one leg, a normal leg. You could, a table or a chair or whatever, doesn't work. If a person just does things in one line, It's his nature. It's split to both angles, both directions. Smile right and left. Adam yoytzim metivoy vergelem vatzeas shlichus adam elyon b'chol mator elahu nishlach. Halacha shemafreses parsi shasedek yimel maila umel mato. Like we mentioned at the beginning, it's not just enough that the split, like you said, certain animals can be split just part of the way through the hoof, but the bottom can be totally joined. That's not considered mafreses parsa. It won't be a kosher sign. V'im lav einzu behema toira. Uvdas heisaskus b'shnei akavim ein tzricha liis b'chins chetzoynis b'lvad. Spiritually, that means we can't have this occupation with both signs just being external. It has to be deep. It has to be through and through. Kishadavar ein el b'chetzoynis b'lvad v'il b'pnimis sharu yodem b'zeh b'kav echad b'lvad hareza loy sechelu. You cannot consume it. Ein kan halav eskalos, it cannot become part of kedusha. Drusha chatzoya bepnimius v'gam bepoyel l'chola oimik va'oz techelu neitzeres eskalos hayidei boisid bakun. You want to make sure that it can become part of godliness. Has to be thoroughly and completely on both sides of the equation. That I'm totally devoted. Alav sois harim achar sh'adam ba b'magim gashmius hakshura b'chumriyus. Also, so the Rebbe says, here is where the other sign comes in. A human being has a problem. We are not objective by our own nature. We are not good at judging ourselves. We are subjective. It's called nageh b'davar in the terminology of Chazal. So what can we do to ensure, am I truly split? Do I really have my devotion to Hashem on both sides? V'darish siman nois of ma'alageda lilois livdaik levar shuv v'shuv. I don't know if in Hebrew there's this term, but in English there's the term, I have to chew this over. When you have to, there is this term. You have an idea, I say, I need to think this over. You're going to use, I want to chew it over. You say about an idea. I'm talking about an idea. In English, there's a concept to say, I need to chew over this idea. So that's the idea of malageda. I chewed it once. The animal chewed it once. Swallowed it. Brings it up again, says, ulai, maybe we have to look at it differently. Let's chew it again. That is the idea that I can't make a split-second decision because I can't rely on myself. I'm subjective. So I need to chew it over. Kishem shakasher adam nigish lechel min abehema olav livdoik im yesh la simani tarav im lav osloi lechel mimena. The Rambam, I believe, even says that this is a mitzvah esa d'oraisa, to check for kosher signs of an animal. So we know you cannot eat of the animal until you check for its kosher signs. Kach b'chol inim b'olam hazeh she'adam eskoinen lasis olav livdoik as simonim. Olav liyos batuach she'en oises zois l'malas taibas nafshay. I'm not doing this for my own desire. V'af kishenira loy sha'asiman kayam. That's not enough. Also loy lismech al atzmai v'ton hu biru noisaf. He has to refine this and check this over again. We'll stop over here. Save the copies. And maybe next week or a different week, in L we'll talk about this one, the rest of it.